Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is stuck in a rut, when our brain sort of goes round and round and round in the same sort of pattern, and how we might find ourselves a way free of those repetitive patterns. So should be fun, but before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, and the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us on this Friday. Today we're talking about stuck in a rut and how our we get into these patterns of repetitive thinking. I don't know if you've experienced it. I'm going to take a wild guess that most of us have, where we just go round and round and round. It's kind of in a panic, but definitely on automatic. And sometimes it's hard to get out of that. So I've been talking a lot about DNRS, the dynamic neural retraining system, to retrain our limbic system, which is the fight or flight response that we have. The website is retrainingthebrain.com. You might want to check it out. And part of the understanding is that our limbic system is creating these fight or flight patterns and this repetitive thinking. And so I had shared with one of my clients this notion, or this portion of the program, that is allowing ourselves to recognize that this is just messaging, that it's not necessarily true. So it's like my brain is stuck in a rut and is giving my body and mind false messages, or sending my body and mind false messages. And it's important, I think, as much as we value paying attention to what we're thinking and what we're feeling and how important that can be, that there are also times when we get to recognize that we're actually sort of stuck in this rut that has been made by repetitive, habitual patterning, habitual thinking. And when we can recognize that the messaging that is coming out of that habitual thinking is not necessarily accurate, then we have the ability to free ourselves from it. And I hadn't really realized the power of that statement, that my brain is stuck in a rut and is sending my body and mind false messages, until a client reflected back to me how that had been a touchstone for them throughout their week, when they were recognizing themselves starting to get into panic mode. And what they were able to say is, just chill. I'm stuck in a rut. These are false messages. I don't have to make them real. I don't have to be responding to them in the sense of emergency that they're being relayed. And to be able to find a pathway to relieve ourselves from these uh, deeply ingrained patterns is very, very powerful. To recognize that we are not the pattern. The pattern is not necessarily the truth, and that we can kind of use this awareness to distance ourselves a bit from having to be fully invested and fully engaged in that kind of traumatic pattern. So we when the fight or flight mechanism is activated, it's pretty powerful. It's pretty powerful. It affects our physiology, our thought, and it's kind of like this cascade, this negative or debilitating cascade of thought and emotion that kind of builds on itself. The more panicked we are, the more panicked we become, unless we're able to break that pattern. And one way to break it is to say, hey, there's a pattern of overwhelm going on here, and that pattern of overwhelm is generating this response that is not necessarily reflective of what the reality of the moment is. So managing ourselves is an art form. It's an art form, and it's something that is a cultivated skill to use the tools available to us to manage our state, to really find a way to bring ourselves back to present, to bring ourselves back to center, back to our sovereignty, so to speak. What can happen is that we get into these patterns is like a runaway train that overcomes us, that kind of consumes us and separates us from ourselves, from our sense of ourselves, from our sense of balance, from our sense of presence. I'm tempted to say our sense of control, but it's not about control as much as it is about presence. Because when we're present, then we have the ability to be responsive rather than reactive. And it's interesting to be looking at what kinds of triggers and patterns we have that are these programmed kinds of responses, where we'll have something that triggers upset. Let's say, I know for me, actually, years ago, it used to be paying bills. Anytime when it came time to pay the bills, I would kind of spiral. I'd go into anxiety and avoidance and coping, and even though I had the money to pay the bills, it's just that for many years, paying the bills was a challenge, and I didn't necessarily have money, so there was this anchor of anxiety that would just come up anytime I had to pay the bills. And there would be internal conversations about lack, with fear, all kinds of feelings. And so it was automatic. It was automatic. It didn't It wasn't dependent upon my current circumstance or my current ability. It was something that was triggered from the past. And it would make all these conversations and then stir into projecting future concerns around money, even when they weren't warranted. So, very, very interesting dynamic. And in those situations, we get into a heightened emotional state, we get into a heightened physical state where we're anxious and maybe triggering all kinds of coping behaviors. And when we can step back enough to say, whoa, slow your roll. This is just my mind stuck in a pattern. This is just programming from previous trauma. And it's as a result, I'm transmitting the brain, the mind, the limbic system, whatever it is, the nervous system is caught in this rut, stuck in a rut, and is conveying false information. And so when we can acknowledge that, it gives us a little bit of a distance. It gives us a little bit of an opportunity to take a breath and say, oh, okay, maybe I don't have to get so deeply enmeshed in this. Maybe I don't have to go down that rabbit hole. Maybe I can just sort of step back and relax a little bit. And I think that there's tremendous power in that. There's tremendous power in recognizing that we are not our emotions. We are not our thoughts. Our thoughts and emotions can serve to inform us. We experience them. We can interact with them as communications, but they are not who we are. That they are things that we experience. Whatever we are that's having that experience is not bound and limited to the experience itself. And therefore, when we have the ability to create that remove, then we can more readily regain our composure, regain our sense of center. And the same thing along with that idea, with this limbic system retraining, so many of us have all kinds of symptoms. For example, anxiety or conditions, physiological conditions, maybe autoimmune conditions, maybe conditions of certain sensitivities to foods or electromagnetic stimulation, or as Rosalind said, tiredness. Exactly, that fatigue can be a reaction also to stress. In fact, that's one that I work with because I've had a lot of fatigue as a symptom. And so what's interesting is that all these different conditions, all of these different outpicturings, physiological, emotional, whatever, are often viewed as different conditions. And so I had this whole litany of conditions that doctors really didn't have an inroad to, for example. And through this training, the limbic system retraining, again, retrainingthebrain.com, and it's called DNRS, Dynamic Neural Retraining System. What we learn is that these are all symptoms of the same thing. That it's almost like the limbic system is kind of a master controller that when it's out of whack, creates this cascade of all kinds of other things being out of whack. from emotional regulation to all kinds of physiological regulation as well, including depression, anxiety, exhaustion, inflammation, neural conditions. Hello, Gia. Wow, it's been a while, sweetheart. So good to have you joining us. We're talking about how our brains can get stuck in a rut and create all kinds of conditions for us out of fight or flight. And when we start to recognize that, we can also recognize that we have the capability to be repatterning, to be reprogramming. And it's so interesting. It's so interesting to notice in clients and in myself the patterns of behavior that are familiar, even though they're really painful. So, for instance, patterns of thinking the worst of things, the patterns of thinking that something's going to go wrong, of catastrophizing, of expecting the worst, of focusing on the negative, on finding fault. All of these kinds of patterns can be really debilitating, and yet they are comfortable because they're familiar. And it's so interesting to notice that as people are transforming, as people are moving from these debilitating negative patterns into a place where they're entertaining more positivity, where they're experiencing a greater lightness in their lives, that they go back and start recreating the negative or stressed or debilitating state in what looks like a deliberate way. So I have clients who will acknowledge the positive change that they've made, and then they'll go back and say, but last week, like right now I'm doing great, but last week, and then they'll go into a whole dissertation about how awful last week was, to be able to bring themselves back into that awfulness, because the happiness is so uncomfortable, because it's so unfamiliar. So that's when we can recognize, wow, my brain is stuck in a rut, and I am just creating these messages, these false messages for my body. It was so fascinating with multiple clients, but with one specifically, where one of the things that came out of the session was, it's okay to be okay. That for so long they had been living in this idea of emergency, and living in this idea of how everything is so fragile, that things could go south in a moment, or that they were constantly, perpetually going south, that they were practicing this new path of, it's okay to be okay, because it wasn't. They were never okay. And in not being okay, that's how they received love. That's how they received attention. That's how they received support, is when things were in emergency, when things weren't okay, then somebody could come and save them. That was another part of it, which was really fascinating, is that they were waiting for somebody to come save them. And in order to be saved, there has to be an emergency. You have to not be okay in order to be saved. And so when it started, as it's starting to become okay to be okay, they are also recognizing that they can really take care of themselves, that they don't really need somebody to come to their rescue. They can come to their rescue. And there's an empowerment about that that is new to them, to be able to say, wow, you know what? Things are okay. I don't have to create an emergency here. I don't have to create some kind of drama so that somebody can come and save me. So our ruts show up in all different ways, these patterns of behavior. And when we can recognize, hey, that's just a rut, it's not the reality, it's not the way things are. This is just my habit of perception, my habit, the lens through which I have habitually viewed the world. And we can transform that and recognize that in the process of transforming that, there's going to be resistance. It's likely that there's going to be resistance. It's not a guarantee, but it's very likely, because we cling to the familiar. We cling to what's known. And even if it's painful, we cling to it because at least it is something predictable, and there is comfort in that familiarity, despite whatever discomfort there is. It's a weird thing that we do as humans, getting comfortable with our discomfort so that we tend to perpetuate it without really wanting to, knowing that it's destructive. We just sort of perpetuate those patterns. And one of the biggest ways beyond those patterns is to replace them with positive patterns or more productive patterns. And in order to be replacing them with more productive patterns, it takes practice. It takes persistence and persistent input to be able to create new pathways, new patterns, new programs that can relieve our limbic system of its stressors so that we can better experience our centeredness, our balance, our wholeness. So just to circle back around, by identifying the fact that we're stuck in a rut, that our brain is sending our body false messages, then it kind of gives us freedom to behave differently, to experience things differently, to expand our range. It's really interesting as I'm practicing this, that it's an hour practice each day. There's a training that is pretty affordable considering the life altering potential of it, that you can find on retrainingthebrain.com. The first 2 lessons are free, so you can check it out and see if it resonates for you. But it's really interesting to me that I really did not have access to a whole lot of good memories. I would have to work really hard to find good memories. And as I'm practicing this, which is about creating or reliving and also generating new memories, reliving old positive memories, experiencing more positive emotions, as that process is evolving, as I'm practicing it more, I notice that I'm better able to remember other positive memories. So as far as a result goes, to recognize that something's changing, that's one of the big things that I can see very quickly, is that I'm having access to more pleasant memories. And as a result, I'm also having access to more pleasant emotions. So we've said that anger breeds anger, anxiety breeds anxiety, positive emotions breed positive emotions as well. And this is probably one of the most poignant, clear examples of that dynamic that I can express to you. So by practicing the flood of good feelings, we are reinforcing our ability to feel good feelings. So it amplifies. Just as the negative feelings amplify, the positive feelings can amplify as well. And so I invite you to recognize when you might be stuck in that rut, stuck in the loop of negative thought, and recognize, oh, it's just a pattern. It's just my brain giving my body false messages. It's not that it's real. And that allows us maybe to catch a breath, to take a step back. And I invite you to explore it. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like and follow both Enlightened World Network as well as my YouTube channel. The links are in the description. And as always, it is ever a pleasure and privilege to be able to muse together on these mornings and to be exploring what it is to be alive and human. So until next time, so much